Howdy and welcome, folks, to today's KKE. My name is Ron Colson. I got Shane Monkus here with me today. Shane, want to say hello?
Hello, folks.
And our topic today is patching troubleshooting. We've covered patching many times from lots of different aspects and points of view and so forth in the KKE program. And I will be throwing up some links here in a little bit to some of those past sessions, so you can go watch those if you need a review. Because today we are not going to be covering patching, right? We're going to be talking about specifically troubleshooting. You already got it set up, it's already working, and then occasionally some patches don't deploy. There are some pretty common, typical root causes there, right? And we want to help you. We want to teach you what those things are and how you might discover them and resolve them once you find them. So, a few preliminaries to get out of the way as per typical. We got the Backyard Boot Camp program that we are very excited about. And this year, it's going to be even better than ever. Really excited. Andrew and I are about this. You can see the different cities and dates we'll be going to this year. In case you don't know about BBK, it is classroom-based training. It's a small class size. We stay well under 50 students. So it's a week long. You get 1 day of K2 and 3 days of K1. You can choose either or you can have both, whichever. But the point is, you get lots and lots of time to learn about these things. You get lots of hands-on. We actually provide everybody with a lab, and they have their own K1, their own K2, and some test machines and so forth. And you get lots of hands-on exercises, lots of one-on-one time with the trainer, and you get lots of one-on-one time with your fellow customers, whom you can learn a lot from. It's a lot of fun, a lot of learning. You get lots of stuff to take home with you. It's really a great time. You can see the link there. You can go check that out. I hope to see you at one of those cities coming up soon. Upcoming KKEs in the English language. We've got today, of course, patching troubleshooting in an open forum on Thursdays. We typically do. Coming up on Tuesdays in the next few weeks, understanding imaging Mac deployments next Tuesday. We did one last year, summerish, and we're going to redo that topic because we've had some new advancements and improvements and enhancements in that arena and deploying specifically to Macs. And then the next Tuesday after that, K2000 deployment workbench. We're going to talk about all the tools, and they are legion, folks, that we have on the deployment workbench to use in conjunction with your K2000 to make your deployment smoother and faster and more efficient and more awesomer. And then you'll notice we're going to be out of the office February 16th and 18th. That's the first Backyard Boot Camp. All right, so we won't have KKEs that week, and we'll resume the week thereafter. Definitely recommend, folks, if you can make it to a Backyard Boot Camp. It's really awesome. Okay, lots and lots of resources for you here, and Mr. Shane is going to throw these links into the chat window for you, so you don't have to write them down. You might want to copy them out of the chat window and save them to your notes so you can go peruse them later at your leisure. But the software.dell.com/case training, this is where you can find all the training resources that CASE has for you. Every single customer that gets a K1 or K2 gets training with it. Your company has already had training, even if you weren't a part of it. And you can go get those recordings at that site. Okay, it's called Jumpstart. If your company has recently purchased the appliance and still hasn't had your training, you can go to that site and get set up for your training. You can find all the Backyard Boot Camp, KKE, and InkPad resources at that site as well. IT Ninja probably ought to be the homepage in your browser. Anything and everything IT related you can go to learn about and discuss with your IT peers, many of whom own CASE appliances, right? So you can check all that out at IT Ninja. Also, there's a point system for contributing to the community, and you can turn your points in for free stuff, and that's always cool. the homepage of Dell Case Support, support.software.dell.com, where you can, of course, find all our knowledge base articles, and we have a ton of them, folks. Chances are, if you're having an issue, we already know about that issue, and you can go and find the solution to your problem in a knowledge base article we've already written there. You can reach out to Case Support and get assistance if you need to at that website as well. You can download all the new versions of the Case appliances and so forth and so on. Case.uservoice.com. If you have a feature request you'd like to see included in a new version of one of our products, that is the website to go to. Okay, you have a direct line to our developers, our engineering staff. You can tell them exactly what you want them to do in terms of new features or improvements to and enhancements to the appliances. You can get feedback directly from the engineers, and you can have an opportunity to clarify exactly what your request is and why and so forth. You can also find out the timeline, right? You can get information on the roadmap into when the features will be included in the future. And finally, connect.case.com, a special invite just for you KKEers /join/KKE. You can go and sign up there, and it's a social media rewards kind of website, right? You take surveys and answer questions and interact in the community, you earn points, you get free stuff. But the really cool thing about it, right, is that is our invite-only community, right? When we have new versions coming out, when we have special events and special that we want to share, those are the first folks that find out about it, right? We have invite-only webinars on all kinds of topics from time to time, and only the folks that are registered at Connect get invited to those things. So you definitely want to check that out. Now, our current product versions. Okay, today we're talking strictly K1000, right? And it's got a very, very new version, and that new version, as Andrew detailed last week, supports Windows 10 and the new Mac 10.11 El Capi 10 versions, right? So if you want to be able to patch those new versions and so forth, then you'll definitely want to upgrade to the latest and greatest K1000 version. You can see the new version of the K2 and the latest version of our K1000 Go mobile apps listed here as well, and Shaney has dropped links into chat. Thanks, Shane. All righty, folks. Now, on to the actual agenda for today, patching troubleshooting. Okay, we're going to start, first of all, with understanding the processes that actually run, that affect, that implement the actual patching, right? What specific programs and processes and services and daemons and so forth, what runs on the K1, what runs on your devices that detects patches, that deploys patches, and so on. You really need to understand all that, because when you later on go start looking through the logs in your troubleshooting that we're going to talk to you about, right, you've got to understand what processes you're looking for and when they should run and what they should look like and so on. So we're going to cover that first, right, understanding the actual processes. Then once we understand all that, then we can get into the procedure of troubleshooting when something isn't working perfectly, right? What are the step-by-step processes? And then when we're done with all that and we've learned how to do this, we got a couple scenarios. We're going to do a little pop quiz, right? We're going to take those things that you learned today, and we're going to actually put them to the test real quick, right? We're going to see if we're grasping and understanding what are the steps we can take to troubleshoot these things when they go wrong. And then, of course, as always, Q&A roundtable at the end. Now, before we get started, as I said, we are not going to be covering how patching works, right? How to set it up, how to configure it, philosophies, concepts, and so forth and so on around setting it up and configuring it for basic usage. We have already covered that previously. And I'm going to, there they are. Andrew already grabbed them for us. They're the two links to the two KKEs we did last year that will teach you everything you need to know about setting it up, configuring it, and using it in your environment, okay? But I want to just make sure we all have a nice baseline here, right? A few basic questions. Do we understand some of these basic things? Number one, in order for a patch to be deployed, Does it need to be detected by the K1000? I mean, if you go to a Windows box right now and you look in the Windows Update feature, it already says some patches that are needed. Can the K1 use that, right? Secondly, what type of patch schedule can perform multiple reboots? What if we have so many patches needed on a given machine and multiples of those patches require reboot, such that we need to have it put some patches on there, affect a reboot, put some more patches on there, affect a reboot, put some more patches on, affect a reboot, and so on and so forth. Which one of the types of schedules that you can run in the K1000 would do that? Could handle that sort of process. And then finally, you have the ability to see the categories, the types, the impacts, and so on of the different patches as released by the vendors, right? And you have the ability to label patches by those things, and lots of people do, right? They label only the criticals or only the security related or, you know, whatever, right? Those kinds of differentiators. Do those terms mean the same on all the different kinds of patches from all the different vendors? You might be surprised by some of these answers if you haven't reviewed our past KKEs on patching. The K1000, first of all, must detect that a patch is needed, or it will never, ever, ever, ever try to deploy that patch to the machine, no matter what you tell it to do, right? You can tell it, take this patch to that machine, go deploy it, but if the K1 has never detected that it is needed by that machine, it will not deploy it. Have to have it detect before you can have it deploy. Number two, did you know that only a detect and deploy can handle patching, reboot, patching, reboot, patching, reboot, patching, reboot, and so on? And then finally, did you know that security-related, critical, recommended, even operating system versus application patch, those terms don't have industry-wide accepted definitions that are the same for every patch and every vendor. Those are really made up meaningless terms, variable terms. You don't want to depend on those, okay? So you can learn all of this and way more by reviewing those two KKEs that Andrew has dropped into the chat window later on. You really need to understand all that stuff for today to make sense. Okay, now that we've done that basic review, let's launch on into understanding what actually goes on when we tell these things to run. And to do that, the first thing we really need to understand is some of the files that are involved. Okay, there are different types of files that we use to affect patching. Number one, an LST. You might be able to figure out really quick that that's a list file type, right? We've got different lists that we'll be talking about here in just a second. Right, so you subscribe, you get a list file. You detect what needs to be deployed, you get a list file, and so on. PLS files, these are patch signatures. Okay, we talk about in our past KKEs on patching the difference between the signature of a patch and the actual package that can be installed of the patch, right? That's what a PLP is. PLS is the signature, the PLP is the installable patch package. SCR, a script file, right? This is the Java command line utility that Lumention uses to actually install the patches when K1000 runs patch deployments on your machines. The SCR client is what invokes that script to actually run the patch deployments, the patch detections, and so on. And an OSPX file is a relatively new Windows patch file type. So the Windows patches that are stored on the K1000 that are deployed onto your machines that should they be needed are a .ospx file type, okay? All right, so now we talked about some of the types. Let's talk about some of the specific examples of those files. The handshake.lst, and you can see here you've got a description of what the patch does and a description, or rather the path, where the file is held on the local device with the agent installed, okay? So the handshake.list file is the list of the patch detection files that need to be detected for on that particular machine. So when you tell us to go detect which patches are needed, right, we're going to take out of that all the ones you subscribe to. We're going to take just the ones that match the particulars of that particular device, right? So just the ones that are compatible with that operating system and so forth, right, in the right language and whatnot. So we build a list of that. Here's the ones to detect on this machine, and there's a different handshake.list on a different machine, and so on and so forth. The detect.list file. So once you built this handshake list of the files that need to be detected, then the detect.list is a list of those that we need to download to the machine so that we can perform the detections, right? The PLS files are very small text files. The PLP files can be huge. They're actual patches. But the subscription, the signature files, right, are relatively small text files, and they get downloaded to the machine. We perform a detection, and they stay there, right? And then some new patches come out, and it's time to run another detection on the machine. Some of the PLS files are already there, but some of the PLS files for the new patches haven't yet been downloaded to the machine and saved in the C drive. So we need to download some more PLS files. That's what the detect list file is. Okay. The deploy.lst. So we've done a detection, and we now know which patches need to be deployed onto this machine. We're going to build a list of those patches. That's the deploy.lst. The lm.detection_x64.exe. This is the specific executable that is used to perform the detections. So it takes the detect LST, downloads the right PLS files, and then the exe here will run to perform the detect of those PLS files, which patches are actually needed by the device. And then the kpatch.exe runs the patch deployment process. Okay, lm_detection_x64 runs the detection, and kpatch.exe runs the deployment. Okay? All right, now, we understand some of those files. So we got the LST files and the PLS files and the PLP files and the OSPX files and some executables and so forth, right? So we need to download all those things from the internet. The K1000 needs to download those from the internet so that it has them available to utilize when running the patching processes, right? And then, of course, as new patches come out from the various vendors, they got to get downloaded to the K1000 so that they're available for the K1 to then download and utilize on the different devices, okay? So this is that process. So first of all, the patch process is initiated, and the K1 connects to case.com to make sure, first of all, that you're current on your maintenance, right? Because patching is only supported on a K1000 if you're current and active on your maintenance contract. So it checks your entitlement. And then it downloads a plpatch.tgz file. TGZ, folks, is just a Unix zip file. That's all, right? It's like on Windows, it'll be .zip, and on Unix and stuff, it's a .tgz or something like that, different kind of zip file. And so it downloads that and starts, unpacks and starts taking some of those files and putting them where they need to go on the K1000. And it then gathers up your subscription settings. And as we know from the other KKEs, when you subscribe to the patches, Lumention supports, through the K1000, supports tens of thousands of different patches for deployment to your machines. Just an ungodly number of patches, folks, okay? And so you don't need all those. You don't have all those things in your environment. So you subscribe to only the ones that you actually need. What operating systems do you have in your environment? What vendors of applications do you have in your environment? And what kind of patch types do you want, and so forth and so on? Out of those, you subscribe to some of them, and so those settings are gathered right here at this point in the process. And then the SCR file, the script file, is initiated to actually download those signatures, the PLS files, right, and the OSPX files, So we have all of the necessary signatures so we can do detections now. Okay, all that patch metadata is now loaded into the K1000. And so now we have a catalog. If we go to catalog, we see some stuff listed now. Okay, now they all got 0 in the size column because we only have signatures. And then as we learned from the other KKEs, once we go and run some detects with those signature files, then we'll download some actual PLP and patch files, right? So the third-party files are then downloaded. So we've downloaded stuff from Case so far, and now we start getting stuff from Lumention and from Microsoft and all the third-party vendors and so forth, Adobe and Apple and whatnot. All those files get downloaded to the K1000. And each patch has a status. Either it's active or inactive, or it's disabled or it's enabled, right? And we've discussed what those terms mean and how they impact your patching processes in the past KKEs. But the statuses now are set. If you've got it automatically activated as they come down in your subscription settings, then we'll automatically activate them. If you don't, then we'll inactivate them and so forth and so on. Right? Superseded patches, if you want them to be automatically inactivated, we inactivate them now at this point and so on. Now, any unused patches, you have the ability in your settings to configure the unused patches to be automatically deleted. So you needed the patch, but all the machines that needed it got it. And now we don't need it anymore. It's been 30 days or 45 days or whatever setting you chose. And we don't need that patch anymore on any machines, and so we delete the unused PLP file. Right? That's when that process runs. And now the script creates a list of the actual patches, not just the signature files, but the actual patches to the PLPs to be downloaded from the interwebs. And so those packages are now downloaded, and the package metadata is loaded into the K1000, right? And then finally, we're done. And we log everything on the K1000 side in the settings module under the logs tab. You can click on the patch download log. Okay? So that's how that process works in detail. Now that we have signatures, we can perform detections. So let's go through how that process works. Okay? So once detect is initiated, we perform the handshake. Remember that handshake.lst file, folks? Right? We've got to communicate with the device. The K1 has to communicate. We have to establish a baseline. Okay, you're there, I'm there, we're good, we can talk, let's do this thing. Right? So the handshake.lst lists all the detection files that are compatible with that device. And now the agent responds, says, I have this operating system and this language. And so now we know which, out of all of the detection files that we've subscribed to, all the signatures that we've subscribed to, we now know which ones need to be detected for on this machine. Remember the detect.lst, right? And all the PLS files that need to be downloaded? All that runs. Okay, detection runs, OSPX, the LST and the PLS files, all those that we don't already have on the machine, the ones that we need to download get downloaded. Okay, it generates that detect.lst and downloads those patches now. Now we run the actual detect. Now that we have the LST and the PLS files and the OSPX files, now we can perform a detect. We actually run that. The signatures are downloaded and the detect scan is performed. Okay. All the results, the success, failure, which patches are actually needed, which ones aren't, and so forth, all that's going to be in the detect.log, which is on the C drive, and it gets uploaded and shared with the K1000 because, of course, the K1000 needs to know which patches you actually need so I can download those and run a deploy or detect and deploy whenever you tell us to run it. Okay, and it tries to keep that folder where it stores the PLS files and the PLP files, tries to keep it as clean as it can to maintain what it needs to maintain so there's not a lot of copying that it's got to do again and again and again and again, right? But it tries to keep it as clean as it can as well, right? Try to balance not having to re-download stuff all the time with not using up too much disk space, right? Now, that's the detect. Of course, detect detects which patches are needed. A deploy, and this is true whether it's a detect and deploy or just a plain old deploy, then a deploy portion is the one that actually installs the patches that are needed. So once deploy is initiated, again, a handshake, remember that, right? responds with, I'm this OS in this language. Okay? Whatever prereqs are needed to be able to perform the detect, any portion of kpatch.exe or whatever, any of the things that are needed for the deploy to be successful, we need to have those down on the C drive. Okay? The actual processes begin to run. Right? We download whatever those files are needed that we don't have. And then the third-party files, and then if it's a deploy only, right, then we'll reuse the existing information from the previous detect. If it's a detect and deploy, then of course the new detect's going to run, and we'll have updated information. But if it's just a deploy only, right, then at this point we've got that k1 deploy.lst file that gets generated and downloaded, so that we from the k1 detect.lst, right? We have the deploy.lst, which tells us now which of those patches that were needed in the detect.lst. In the deploy.lst, it lists the ones that need to be deployed that don't already exist on the C drive of the machine, weren't previously downloaded sometime in the past. Okay? And now that we have all of the PLPs that the machine needs to have installed, now we can actually run the kpatch process, grab those files, and install them. And then we run however you told us to run. If it's a deploy only with prompts, if it's a detect and deploy with forcing, whatever it is, we run the way you tell us to run. And the results, success, failure, any sort of problems or extra details, whatever, right? All that's in the deploy.log, and again is uploaded and shared with the K1. It's why I can go into the K1 and click on any device in inventory, scroll down to the security section of that device's inventory detail page, click on the patching results, and I can see all the results, success, failure, each patch, is it needed by this machine or not, and so forth, when it was an attempted install and whether it was successful and all that jazz. And again, we're going to try to keep the folders as clean as possible, right? We don't want to have to do a bunch of re-downloading and re-downloading every once in a while when we need a patch again and again. But by the same token, we don't want to use up too much disk space. So now that we understand all of that, we understand all the files and the processes involved, how do we actually troubleshoot some of this stuff? Well, the first thing is, let's cover the basics, especially if we're just setting all this stuff up, right? If all this is brand new to you and you're going to, when you're done today with us, you're going to go and watch those 2 KKEs and you're going to actually try to set up patching, right? There's a few prereqs you really got to understand, things that will be showstoppers. So there's certain websites the K1000 needs to download from. We talked about that, the CASE websites, the Lumention website, and various third-party websites to download these PLS files and PLP files and so forth, right? You can see a list of them over there on the right-hand side, and Shane or Andrew is going to grab the link from this slide and throw it into the chat window for you. There's a KB article we have that details all the firewall ports that are needed to be open, and all these websites that you might need to waitlist in your proxy server or whatever. Shane just threw that in there. Thanks, Shane. So we got the various firewall ports that are needed for the K1 to be able to reach up to the internet and download these things, and then the various ports that are needed between the agents and the K1 to be able to get these things from the K1, right, for all this to work. And all that's detailed in the link Shane just shared. So you want to make sure that your K1 has its necessary access to the internet to download these things. And your devices have the necessary access to the K1 for all these processes to work. Okay? And of course, DNS, your devices, in order to download things from the K1, especially in order to download things from the K1, whatever name you've assigned to your K1 needs to be resolvable on every device. You really, 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 really want to make sure that your DNS is working. That'll be the showstopper. You can get the agent basic communication inventory and stuff to work sometimes, and then you got to try to do a deployment that involves downloads, like whether it be software distribution or scripting or patching or something like that, and all of a sudden stuff doesn't work. Quite often that comes back to DNS. You don't have the proper name on the K1, you haven't told the proper name to the agents, and you don't have that name properly resolvable throughout your environment via DNS. Okay? Really important you make sure all that works. So after you've got all that squared away, and the K1 is able to download stuff from the internet, okay, and you're able to run managed installs and scripts, so that means your machines can properly resolve the name of your K1 and communicate with it and so on. Now we need to begin to set up the patching on the K1. And again, we're not going to teach you all the details of this because we've done that in KKEs you can go watch. But what I'm pointing out here is quite often when you have a problem patching, it comes back to some of these common settings that you either didn't configure correctly, whatever you need it to be in your environment, or you somebody changed. Everything was working, and then something didn't work anymore. And you might not be aware, but some other technician came in here and changed one of these common settings. So I want to point those out. First of all, subscription settings. Only active patches can be detected for and can be deployed to your machines. The K1000 will not even attempt to detect the need for a patch or deploy a patch if it is marked as inactive. So if you are not automatically activating new patches by checking the box you see on the top right-hand screenshot, if you do not have that checked, you are responsible for going and finding every single patch in the catalog, and there are tens of thousands of them. You are responsible for going and finding all the ones you need, and making them active manually. Okay? So check the box. You got to make sure that you subscribe to all the right things, OSs and publishers and types and impacts. And if you need any labels here on your subscription settings, again, we've covered all the details in our past KKEs. Make sure the patch download settings are correct. Right? What time are we downloading these things? Do we have clear internet at that time? Right? Do we have the proper settings here? Are we downloading frequently enough? We can't detect for things that we haven't downloaded signatures for yet. Right? We can't possibly deploy patches that are needed if we haven't downloaded the PLPs yet. We got to make sure that we time when the schedules run with when the downloads happen to ensure that the necessary signatures and or packages exist on the K1 for us to perform detects, perform deploys. Okay? And then the schedule detail itself. If I'm trying to run a detect, trying to run a deploy, do I have the right settings in the schedule? Right? Detect only, deploy only, detect and deploy, reboots, no reboots. Got the right patches associated? Am I targeting the right devices? And so on and so forth. Okay? Check all these things first. One more thing, replication shares. First of all, if you're not using them, use them. Okay? This replication shares, leaving patching aside, replication shares for all your downloadables, managed installs, scripts, patches, agent updates, everything, Dell updates, the single greatest thing you can do to ensure high performance of your K1000 appliance. Okay? Because the most resource intensive things that the K1000, the single most resource intensive processes that the K1000 runs are large numbers of machines all downloading packages simultaneously from the K1000. That means patching, folks, right? Patch deployments. So if we offload the download of those things to different shares throughout our environment, and the K1000 doesn't have to service all of those downloads, the K1000 is now far stronger, has lots more resources available. So you definitely should be using replication shares. But the important bit here, and when it comes to troubleshooting, is do I have the replication share configured correctly? Did somebody come in here and turn it off? Did somebody go and delete the files? Did they change the hours that it replicates, and has it not yet replicated the patches and signatures and so forth that are necessary in that share? And so when a machine goes to do a detect deploy, they're just not there to download from. Right? Do I have it fail over? Do I not have it fail over? Okay. Did I select all the right operating systems so that it replicates all the necessary patches over to that remote office so that I have the ability to detect and or deploy on those particular operating systems in that particular office? Okay. Do I have the right devices going to the right replication shares? I do this by building good device labels based on locations but maybe somebody went and changed a label. The right label is still associated with the replication share, but they went and changed the configuration of the label, and now it's got the wrong devices going to the wrong replication shares. This happens more often than you think, folks. Okay? So it's definitely something you want to make sure you rule out before you start going too deeply into troubleshooting the patching. We're showing you the basics first, and then we always start the simplest thing. Everybody here knows the troubleshooting process, right? We start simple and work our way to more complex. We don't go straight to the most complex possible answer, right? Shane, do you want to share that with the rest of us?
I suppose I could. I like to name all of my replication shares after famous shipwrecks so that during the replication time I can say, oh, that Ella Fitzgerald is sinking.
Get it, folks? Thinking? Yeah, he's hilarious.
That was terrible.
Thanks, Shane. That's a good dad joke, though. So, good. All right. So now, patch statuses. So we've ruled out all the simple stuff, Ron. Okay, all that stuff works. That's great. But we got some specific errors. And actually, some of these specific error codes, you can see a chart of some of the error codes on the right-hand side. There are more of them. Out at in our knowledge base articles, you can go and search and find. You might find some of these codes point back to some of the potential causes that we've already shown in the last few slides. Okay, but you can see here some common ones. First of all, success instead of success 102. Sometimes the patch deployment shows success. Sometimes it shows success 102, all right? And success means it's installed, verified, done, good. Success 102 simply means I installed it, but this particular patch requires a reboot to truly be installed. So hopefully, after the next reboot, the next time a detect runs on the machine, you discover that it did, in fact, get fully installed, but sometimes it doesn't, right? Installed pending reboot. Hopefully that works. We'll see next time, right? You might have to go a few times. But that's what that means specifically, okay? And it will show up as not patched. Even if it says success 102, right, it will show up as still not patched, still being needed by the machine until it's verified installed by a future detect, okay? Doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong or broken. It's just sort of an interim status. And you might see other patches that are listed as being installed on the machine, but have no deploy date, right? So how can they be deployed onto the machine but not have a time and date stamp of when they were deployed? That simply means the K1 detected the patch was already present, but the K1 wasn't the mechanism that put it on, that deployed that patch to that particular computer. It might have been installed manually by the user or manually by a technician, might have been installed by Windows Update or some other process, right? An auto update feature of some kind, or maybe you have WSUS or whatever. It means the K1 detected that it's already installed, but the K1 wasn't the system that deployed it onto that particular device, okay? So we can get lots of different status messages, success and error codes, when we run detects, when we run deploys. And we've got that information all documented in our knowledge base articles. You can go and search and find them there. Now, to reiterate here, a little higher level, some of the processes that are involved, the actual, when you go look in the log files, you will see these actual EXEs, executables, and the processes and error messages and success messages surrounding them listed in this particular order. So when a patch deployment, say, runs, right, a detect, a deploy, a detect, and deploy, K-patch runs, and then, of course, it runs the LM detection engine to actually perform the detect. And then if any patches, PLS files or PLP files are needed to be copied down to the machine, downloaded to the device, in order to run the detect, to run the deploy, K-copy, another executable, runs to do that. And then finally, when deploy is actually ready to install the patches, kpatch.exe runs. And if you've prompted, if you've configured a prompt in the patch schedule, like pop up and ask them if it's okay or to run the patches or reboot or whatever, There's another executable in the agent directory called kuseralert.exe that runs to do any sort of prompts or alerts. Okay? The importance of bringing these up here, folks, is when you go look at the logs, we're going to talk about here in a sec, you go look at the logs, you're going to see these executables. You need to understand what they do and what order they should fall in. Okay? Now, here is the best practice case recommended troubleshooting process. Pretty much for anything. You'll notice it doesn't really say patching troubleshooting. It says agent troubleshooting process. Anything that the K1 and agent perform on a device, whether it is inventory, custom inventory, managed installations, file synchronizations, scripting, patching, agent updates, Dell updates, anything at all that the agent runs on a device, we're going to use this process to troubleshoot that if it's not working. Okay? We start, first of all, with the best practices. We've gone through some of that. We've given you links to go watch other KKEs. Make sure it's set up and configured correctly. I'm telling you, folks, 90% of the tickets we get, they just didn't do it right. You just didn't configure it right. Once we configure it correctly, there's nothing actually broken. It's just not configured correctly. Configure it correctly, the problem disappears and everything works. Okay? Always go back to your BPs. Start there. Make sure that everything is configured correctly. Then we move on to actually troubleshooting stuff. So if we want to troubleshoot something, we should be aware that while there are already agent log files, already logging stuff on the C drives of all the machines, and some of that information is shared with the K1000 and the web UI. By default, the agent doesn't log everything, and it doesn't log what it does log extremely verbosely, okay? So if we want to really troubleshoot, we're going to need to put the agent into debug mode, and then we can retry the task. Skipping over 3, I know, I'll come back to that in just a second. We put it in debug mode and then retry whatever it is, patch schedule, managed installation, custom inventory, a script, whatever. We retry that thing, and now it will, A, not only log it, and it might not have logged it if it wasn't in debug mode at all, and B, it will log it extremely verbosely. Okay? And now we'll have some actual usable logs. Now, the reason I insert step 3 here, it's not just because I had 8 widgets on the slide, I promise. Right? The reason I insert number 3 here is the K-agent log is full of all kinds of stuff. But when I'm troubleshooting, it would be very helpful if the file only contained the section of stuff I want to look through, and I don't have to wade through a whole bunch of other stuff that isn't germane to my specific troubleshooting task. So, once we put the agent into debug mode, if I then rename the K-agent log to like kagent.log.old, or I happen to use my initials, I would name it kagent.log.rpc, right, or .ron or something like that, right? The K1's going to realize, the agent's going to realize, hey, I don't have a K-agent log, it's going to create a new one, and it's going to be fresh and clean and empty. You get me? Now I retry the task, and I won't have to wade through hours or days of stuff to find what I'm looking for in that log file. Okay? All right. Now that we've retried the task, and, you know, hopefully it failed again. I mean, if something failed and you retry it, you want it to fail again. You don't want intermittent weird problems that come and go. Those are impossible to troubleshoot. Right? So hopefully it failed again, so you got some good juicy logs in there. And now you could just grab the kagent.log and look through there, but you know what? It's possible that whatever might be broken, whatever might be specifically failing, isn't directly related to the case agent. It could be something on the computer, right? Another log file somewhere or something, or another configuration file. Well, we have this really cool tool, and Shane has dropped into chat one of the links. There's should be another one there. If you want to go ahead and drop the capture state tool, Shane. there's a cool tool that our support team has created, and he's going to drop, there it is right there, the link in chat. Okay, save those 2 links, folks. This capture state tool, and there's an article that link goes to, tells you step-by-step how to use the capture state tool. It's a really cool tool that they've created that gathers not only the K-agent log, but a whole host of other log files and configuration files. Pretty much everything you would ever need to troubleshoot anything that the agent might attempt to do on a device. So you run this capture state, and it gathers up all of that stuff. Right? It takes a copy of all of it, puts it all in a zip file, and now we have a point in time where we can go back any time in the future and we can look at that zip file. We can open it up and look at the various log files, and we can see the details of the task that failed. Okay? And this isn't just for you to use to gather up the logs and put on the ticket when you need case support help. You can run this tool. You can use this process, folks, outlined on this slide, long before you contact case support. And if you do, your ticket's going to get resolved faster, I promise you. A, you're going to already have ruled out the basics. B, you're going to have the logs to drop right into the ticket from the instant you create it, right? You're not going to have to get a bunch of emails from case support going, hey, I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that. It's already there. They're going to be able to go straight to the heart of the matter, find your problem, give you the solution, and you're done, right? But again, you can do this long before you reach out to them. You might be able to retry the task, run the capture state tool, find the problem yourself, solve it, and you're done. Okay? So you review those logs. If you need to open a support ticket, open a support ticket. And the thing, you notice I got an asterisk on the last slide, on the last widget thingy there, right? You can get lots and lots of help from your peers at IT Ninja. Chances are if you run into a snag, it's probable that somebody else has already run into that snag, and they may already know the answer there. You're checking KB articles at support.software.dell.com. You're checking posts at IT Ninja. You're asking questions at IT Ninja, right? You're getting answers inside of 15 minutes. You can always use your peers, okay? But this is the process, folks. It's this simple, right? Make sure it's configured correctly. Put the agent in debug mode, retry the task, use the capture state tool to capture up all the logs, review those logs, and get help from case support or your peers if you need to. Okay? So now that we understand this, we got a couple scenarios to test it out. See if we understand what we're going through here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass host to Andrew, so he can do this for me. Okay, so folks, we're going to unmute the mics here in just a second. And when Andrew does that, we're going to hear every sound going on around you. So as soon as we unmute all of you, feel free to remute yourself. Out to the right of your name in the participants panel is a mute button. You just click it and it'll remute you. You click it again, unmute you, and you can talk. Okay? So I'm going to read through a scenario here in just a second, and I want you to just shout it out. If you think you know the answer, let's round table some solutions here together, folks. Okay? So Andrew, if you would.
You are no longer muted.
Yeah. I mean, these same questions are coming. But yeah, it's a PDF that kind of shows.
Regina, we're hearing a lot of noise through your mic. You might mute yourself.
And, but basically, we would be buying 2 new cameras, and I've even got you the model. And that'll allow, and then we've got the existing Pitla map.
Andrew, you want to go and grab
it? As far as the recorder, we're going to be set up, because this isn't going to be a long-term solution. We're going to set up a computer with VAS.
Working on it. Somebody else.
And
yeah.
All right, we got everybody? Cool. All right, folks. So,
there we go.
Some scenarios. First one. So we have some exceptions. Okay, some patches are working fine, but one patch or a few patches aren't. Right? And most importantly here in our little scenario, these patches are actually successfully deploying to some of our machines, but not some others. And what does that tell us? If we think this through, well, that means that our subscriptions are right because we're getting the patch because it's successfully deploying to some, right? It means our download settings are correct because we downloaded those patches in the past, right? Because they successfully deployed to some of our machines, but not to others. And it means our network settings are correct because it was able to download them from the interweb. And some machines were able to download them from the K1000 itself. So we verified all that's correct. What might be the problem? Or how do we troubleshoot to find out what might be the problem? Anybody got an idea? Anyone?
Labels.
More specifically?
See if the computer's in the right label to get the patch.
Okay, that's one possible answer. That's good. That's good. How do we troubleshoot this? How would we actually troubleshoot that, Raphael?
I don't know. Here.
Okay. No, that's good. That's good. That's good. Thank you for being willing to speak out. You're on a possible right track. That is absolutely a possible cause of this problem. Anybody else? Another possible cause or how we might troubleshoot to find out if it's the labels? Anyone? How about if I put Shane on the spot here? Shane, you got any ideas?
Think of a couple of things.
Anything specific?
You mentioned labels already. Specifically, do you have the target patch in the labels that you're using for your distribution, or do you have your target devices in the device labels that you're using for your distribution?
Correct. Yeah, for your patch schedule, right? Do I have the right patch in the right label in the right schedule, and do I have the right device in the right label in the right schedule, so that those two things are married up and should be trying? Or am I only attempting to deploy said patch on the machines that it's succeeding on, and I'm not even bothering to try to deploy that patch onto the machines it's failing on, right? So how might we troubleshoot that, folks? Well, what I would do is I would go create a label with just the problem patch or patches, right, if it's only a few. And I would create a label with only the device or devices that are having the problem with this patch. And I would create me a new schedule and attempt just that patch or those few patches on just that device or those few devices. That way I am absolutely assured, no matter what my other schedule might be, that I have the right patch or patches targeting the right device or devices, and I'm going to run it. Now, before I retry it, remember our process, folks? I'm going to go put the agent on that target device, that test device, in debug mode, rename my K agent, and then retry this special schedule that is just that patch and just that device, retry that schedule, and see if it succeeds. If it still fails, I've got all that awesome agent log detail that I can gather up with capture state, okay? So I'm going to isolate just the patch I'm having a problem with and isolate just the device I'm having a problem with and try those two together and see if I can get either a solution or I can find, I can get the logging necessary to find out what's causing the problem and try to find a solution that way.
Now, further along the lines of labels, another way that a label might affect this is whether or not the device that you're attempting to patch is in your replication label, and whether or not that replication share actually has the patch after it was downloaded to the K1. That's a little bit
actually,
further down the line.
we didn't mention anything about replication shares or remote offices.
Right.
In this particular scenario, you thunder stealer you.
Sorry. My apologies.
I'll let it slide this one time. So Shane already kind of gave away the answer here, folks, but here's another scenario, right? And actually, Alejandro gets credit before you do because he threw that answer into chat a few minutes ago. So
I know, I was cheating off of Alejandro.
Oh, cheating off Alejandro's paper. All right. So here's the issue. You have a international organization, right? You have offices in different regions, in different countries and states and cities and so on and so forth, right? So all the patches are working in all of your locations except one, okay? And in that location, we're not successfully deploying our patches. So again, what does that tell us? What do we already know? Well, we already know that the K1 can successfully get patches from the internet, right, because they're working in some places, and that it can successfully get those patches downloaded to the, not only from the internet to the K1, but from the K1 to the agents. That's working, at least in some of our locations. And we know that, therefore, our network environment, at least for those locations, our network environment settings are correct and working, and our subscriptions are good, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing that we know at this point is one of our offices, and only one of our offices, is not successfully deploying patches. What's the next step? Where do we go to look at? And as already noted, replication shares, right? I must have a problem on the replication share, or maybe multiple replication shares that serve that location, right? K1's fine. Agents are fine because other stuff works, right? I can do inventories and stuff. But if I try, another trick here is, in that location, can I do managed installs, right? Can I do scripts and so forth? It might be that the entirety of the replication share is offline or broken in some way, or it might be that the other stuff is working in the share, but patches got messed up. Maybe if I go to the replication share configuration screen, I see that I'm not syncing, not replicating the patches for the OSs that I have in that particular location, right? It's an all Windows 10 remote office or something, and I'm not syncing the Windows 10 patches to that replication share. So when they go to do a deploy and download the Windows 10 patches from the replication share, they don't exist, and they fail.
I've also seen similar situations to that where the patch is attempting to be deployed from a replication share and the patch is available, but there are prerequisite patches that come before that one that were not replicated to the replication share.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Thank you, Shane. All right, folks. So I hope that whetted your appetite, right? I hope that makes a little more sense to you how to go about troubleshooting these things. So now, mics are already unmuted. We got the chat window. We got the Q&A window. Feel free, folks, whatever questions we haven't answered, whatever scenarios you want to talk through, we're here. Go for it.
I have a question. Is there like a big difference between patching between Windows and patching between Macs? Can you put them on the same schedule, or should they be on different schedules?
You can absolutely have them on the same schedule, right? The K1 is going to detect of the patches that are compatible, right? So let's say I have one schedule, it's got both Windows devices and Mac devices in it, and it's got both Windows patches and Mac patches available to it. And for the sake of brevity, let's say it's a detect and deploy. Although you definitely want to go and watch our previous KKEs to understand all the nuances and differences. So it's going to come to, let's say the first machine it comes to is a Mac. You might think, well, gosh, it's going to waste time detecting whether those Windows patches in the schedule are necessary on this Mac when they can't possibly be needed. But no, because those patches aren't compatible with the Mac OS, it's not even going to bother detecting whether they're necessary because they can't possibly be necessary, right? So it's already going to handle that. And then, of course, it's only going to bother trying to deploy to that particular device the patches that it previously detected as being needed. So it can already deal with operating systems. There is no need to group your OSs into different schedules for patching sake. Zero need. Now, there are a few differences, minor, relatively minor differences, when thinking about patching your Macs as opposed to patching your Windows boxes. And we've covered those in previous KKE as well. We didn't drop the link in the chat, but if you go to support.software.dell.com, click on K1000, click on Knowledge Base, and search our KKEs. You'll find a Mac patching KKE that goes through the few differences that there are to think about. Does that help?
Also saw a question in chat earlier as to whether or not this recording will be available after it has ended.
I did hit recording, so yep, this recording will be made available.
Nothing in Q&A.
All righty.
I have a question.
Shoot.
Well, I'm pretty new at taking over the patching for the K, and I've been doing the WSS updates with Microsoft. We're still doing most of the Microsoft stuff that way, but through the case, we're doing the non-Microsoft patches and some others. We're letting the Microsoft current ones be active, but we don't assign a label to them. Well, we've got a scenario really with we have a few users that connect to the VPN, and it seems like every day we do a deploy twice a day, 10:30 a.m. and then again at 2 p.m. And every time we do a deploy, whether there's been any new patches I've approved or not, it just seems to shut down all traffic on the VPN. It goes to a halt for about 20 minutes to half an hour, and then freeze up again. And you know, we're trying to figure out, well, why? What's the different going? You know, we're trying to decide how do we, is there a way to to differentiate the PCs coming through a VPN so they don't get patches, or how do we, better troubleshoot this and find out why is this happening to us?
So first thing, you want to go watch both of the previous KKEs we've linked. The KKE,
I will. Okay.
The Patching Week Basics. That one covers all the settings, okay, and recommendation stuff. The second one, scenarios. One of the scenarios that we detail in that one, Jim, is external machines, remote machines.
Okay.
We talk about the various settings, the various times that you should run them, the ways in which you should run them, right, so that you avoid some of these issues.
Okay. All right.
Right? And
all right.
I hate putting you off and saying go watch this other video, but we covered it already, and it would take more time to cover it now. What I'd really like for you to do, Jim, is take and go watch those two KKEs and Thursday's open forum, and let's talk it through once you've watched that.
Okay.
Sound
That's
good?
fair to me. That's fair to me.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you much.
You're welcome. All right. What else? Who else can we help? Come on, folks. You're here. We're here. Now's the time.
Is there anything you guys know about the Java patches?
What do you want to know, Mark?
Sorry, it's just kind of a question my boss just actually threw at me, and I happen to be on here. So I was like, well, I'll give it a shot. So we're taking a look at our Java patching currently, and the catalog seems to be missing like updates 71 and 72. But for updates like 65 and 66 for Java 8, it's saying that something supersedes them in the catalog, and so they're showing as inactive and disabled. So we're not getting like any Java patching, up to date Java patching currently. How would I get around that or get 71 and 72 in and showing in our catalog?
Okay. So there's a few things to go through here. Number one, Java doesn't really patch. I'll explain that in a minute. Number two, any patches that you feel are missing from your catalog, You need to, once you've verified your subscription settings, and as near as you can tell, they should be subscribed to and should show up in your patch catalog. And you've got your show menu and your view my menu correct, right? So that you should be showing those in your catalog. And you've done some advanced searches and stuff, and you can't find it. Then you open a support ticket with case, and you, as specifically as possible, list the patches that you feel are missing. And they'll verify that with Lumention, and if there's a problem, they'll get it fixed and get the patches showing up. Okay. If not, then, you know, if everything seems to work on everybody else's K-Box, then maybe they need to help you. Maybe there's a bad view by or some setting or something where you're not seeing it, and they can get into WebEx with you and help you fix whatever that is, and so they'll show up for you.
Okay.
Number two, as I said, Java doesn't really, or number three, I guess, no, Java doesn't really patch, not really and truly, okay? So in the past KKEs, I made a great distinction. It's my own made-up words. I understand this. But I make a distinction between patches, software updates, and software upgrades, okay? So a patch may or may not increment the number, the version number, but it includes specific fixes and/or security fixes, I guess, for lack of a better word, security hole closures, vulnerability fixes or whatever. Whereas a software update may include those things, but it increments the number within the same major. It'll take you from 11.1 to 11.2 to 11.3, 11.9, but not to 12. And then an upgrade, it takes you from 11 to 12, okay? So those are my terms, right? So the K1 has the ability for lots and lots of things to do in the patching module, the ability to do all three of those things. I want to limit it to only doing the first one, patching. I want to use managed installs and/or scripts to do my updates and upgrades, okay? That's the way I break it down. Now, when I say that Java doesn't really do patches, all of their patches are effectively software installers. Okay? They're updaters or upgraders. They're not really patches. So I actually, it's the only thing that I unsubscribe from. I don't do Java patching with my K1000. I let the K1000 do everything else. If I have any Java sensitivity at all on my machines, some machines have to have this specific version can never be upgraded, or they have to have the latest and greatest the day it comes out, whatever it is. I use a script, actually, to perform that process. And the reason why is because lots of different versions of Java can be installed simultaneously on the computer. Every version that's ever been released can be installed on the same computer. But when I have a sensitivity, it's usually that I have to have one and only one version installed, not all previous and the current version. I have to have only one. A lot of problems with Java, that's the problem. The application requires that one and only one version be installed, whatever it might be.
Okay.
And so with a script, I can remove all previous versions and install only the one I want, and I have the machine sitting where I want it, right? I then, the other thing my script does is it disables the client-side auto-update feature, so the users don't get notified, hey, here's a new version that can screw up your machine, click this button, right? And I'm not patching it with a K1, so it doesn't get deployed there. So every time I want to deploy a different version, I update my script to deploy the new version, and it removes all previous, and it turns off the auto-update feature, and that's how I manage Java in my environment. Andrew, you want to add anything to that?
I would say I actually that helps a lot. I actually got to step away and take a call right now.
The only thing I wanted to add, and sorry, I was muted, and specific to this is that, and I'm trying to find the information on this, but I believe Java themselves are holding back, at a certain point, they are holding back the released updates because they want people going to Java 8. So they would prefer you move to Java 8 than continue to update Java 7. I'm trying to find where I read, I swear I read an article about this, but obviously Java 8 would be keeping things in line, but obviously if you, you know, have any
I imagine
issues,
if they contact
right.
case support with this, that case support through Lumention would have whatever official verbiage there is to have on that particular matter, Andrew.
I guess, yeah, I just don't know.
Yeah, okay. Cool, Mark, hope that helps. All right, folks. Anybody else? Anybody else? Nobody else? Last chance, folks. All right. Well, if that's it, I hope we were helpful for you today. We hope to see you in future KKEs. Until then, or Backyard Boot Camp. Until then, folks, have a great day.